delayed y'all start so much. For those of you who don't know Bob and Scott, Bob Farnsworth, who is to the left as you see them, is Senior Vice President of Capital Projects, there you go, and on the screen, at the National World War II Museum. He's been there for about 16 years, has a really great resume before that, including 30 years as a general contractor and 20 years representing owners' interests in major developments, overlapping, interests that then have informed all of his work with what we are about to hear about. Scott Evans is a principal at Mathis Breer Architects, which we were just talking about. Its history actually goes back to 1891. So it is been here a long, long time, New Orleans landmark firm. Scott joined Mathis Breer in 2008 with a background in architectural and environmental design. And they're going to be telling us about the World War II Museum's campus. And if y'all want to start putting your slideshow up there, we'll shift to that. Which last time it was, the last TripAdvisor rankings put it as the #3 attraction, not just museum or museum specifically, Bob?
Museum attraction.
In the US and #8 in the world. So super impressive. We're really fortunate to have it here in New Orleans. It's the #1 attraction in the city of New Orleans. And it is not just our World War II museum, it is the National World War II Museum. So with that, they're going to tell us a little bit more about the evolution of the World War II Museum's campus. Thanks so much, guys.
All right. Thank you, Ann. We'll go ahead and get started. All right, let's see if this, it's not working.
Okay.
Minor technical difficulty on our side. So as I'm not going to go into great detail about why the museum is in New Orleans. We do that normally with every presentation, but I think the folks on this this call have probably heard that multiple times. But the museum did open as the D-Day Museum in 2000, and very soon thereafter was authorized by Congress to be the National World War II Museum and tell the entire story of World War II. And you can see that our mission is to tell, the story of the American experience in the war, why it was fought, how it was won, and very importantly, and what it means today, so that all generations will understand the price of freedom and be inspired by what they learn. So after they were designated by Congress, the first move that the board made was to hire Lord Consulting, who is really the foremost museum consultant in the world. And Lord developed a concept plan, and I was looking at that again. I haven't looked at that in years, but it really continues to be more or less the framework of the entire development. And the plan components were the interpretive concepts, which campaigns, the stories, most of the same pavilion components that we have today. There was one very important change that I'm going to talk about in a minute. It went into the construction costs, the exhibit costs, parking, phasing, staffing, fundraising, feasibility. Projected attendance in the concept was 730,000, which was a pretty accurate number, I think, for the time. The projected revenue was 13.9 million versus our 2019 revenue of 69 million. So we're unfortunately in the last year, we're moving back toward that 13.9 million. It's not quite that bad, but it's been a very, very challenging year for the museum. And then Lord followed that up with a functional plan, and in the functional plan, just more details of the same museum components, but they increased the visitation to 1 million. And when I saw that, when I was very first hired, I thought that was really a number that would be difficult to achieve. And so I talked with Nick, and we hired a firm called ERA. They've since been sold. And we were working with Cheryl Baxter out of Chicago, and she was absolutely terrific to take another look at our feasibility. And she was an important component in the very first decision that we made. You can see this is the kind of one of the outlines in the Lord plan. You look at the building on the corner of Magazine and Andrew Higgins, you'll see it's the Center for the Study of the American Spirit, or CSAS, as we called it. That building was very important to Dr. Mueller, coming from as a history professor and an academic background, and that was our research center and library. And the building was fully designed when I came on board by the SQ firm. Absolutely gorgeous building, and it was going on this prime corner of property. So that the building, the museum had opened in 2000. It contained 2 floors of exhibits and along with a larger macro display in the Louisiana Pavilion component. And then so the plan in the very first phase of the expansion was to build the Center for the Study of the American Spirit. Well, we were in New York, for one of our many meetings, and I think the person that first raised what we were all thinking was the architect Bart Borsanger, and he questioned whether we should be building a space that really would not be attracting visitors, or even for the use of the everyday visitor to the museum. We discussed that further with Cheryl Baxter, who kind of plugged it into her marketing feasibility study, and strongly presented an argument that was not really the correct first step in a major expansion. And she suggested that we develop the more unique visitor components, like the theatrical experience, live entertainment, and a destination restaurant. So her feasibility study really convinced Nick Mueller that we needed to postpone that segment, and we said at the time, well, we'll build that across the street on the corner on the other side of Magazine Street. Well, that didn't happen either at the time. That's now the hotel. Another big decision, and this is I can't overemphasize how important this was in the overall development and success of the museum, was we had a decision on the theater building that's now on this corner. It's on the corner of Magazine and Andrew Higgins. And we were thinking about this building in IMAX was kind of had the most of our attention, but we also were becoming aware of a new 4D experience, and which it was reflects the Beyond All Boundaries experience that we actually created, where you're sitting in a theater and there's moving sets and snow falling on you, and it's more of an active space. And so we're going back and forth on which format we should use. And Patrick Gallagher, who was the selected exhibit designer, in a conversation with Nick, said, well, there's this guy that I know who's just leaving Universal Studios. He's very, very creative, and he's got this idea for a theatrical concept. So make a long story short, we brought Phil Hedema in to meet with us. He sold us on his idea. So we ended up building a $50+ million building and theater experience, using a concept that was, hardly tried and true, and really, the future of the museum was hanging on the success and the ability of this theatrical experience to drive visitors to the museum. And Nick had a statement that he used all the time, that he said, this is not a build it and they will come. This is a build it and they must come. And fortunately, we did build it, and it, as you can see from this next slide, the theater is right on that corner, and it has been really such a driver in the success of the museum. It was what taxi cab drivers are folks in the hotels said, when you come to the city, you've got to go see this Beyond All Boundaries experience. It's really, really special. So it was extremely important. And a decision that we made early on, first the decision not to put the library, research library on that corner, and then the decision use this, take a chance on somebody's very first project, because we believed, he sold us on the concept and what he could do. And boy, he's been tremendously successful since then, but we're proud to have been his first really successful project. And it was, just tremendously important. So you can see that, the development of the campus as it went through several stages of master planning. And there were some unique challenges that we had, coming right out of the box. When I was hired, there was a speed ramp that came off of the Pontchartrain Expressway that just cut straight across what is now the Campaigns Pavilion and into about the middle area of between Camp and Magazine of Andrew Higgins. And so I said, well, what about this ramp that cuts across the master plan? And they said, well, their state's moving that ramp. So I called the highway department about the first week that I was, working, and I said, well, when are you guys going to move this ramp? And they said, we're not moving the ramp. And so, well, there's your first major challenge. So I called Walter Brooks. Walter was incredible in working with us to put a program together to convince the highway department that we could actually move traffic more efficiently by eliminating the ramp, and I think also help pay for it. So he was initially, just extremely valuable and important to the museum, and was always a tremendous supporter of the museum. Another site issue that we dealt with, and you can see it here in this image, is Poyfair Street. This is the dead end of Poyfair. You're standing at the corner of Magazine and looking at the ramp that comes down at Camp Street. And so this is a useless liability for the city. And we thought that, that we'd make a phone call and they would say, yes, please, we're happy to have you take this street off our hands. Well, it wasn't quite that easy. Probably took, 2 or 3 years of negotiating. We had to go from one city attorney to another before we were finally able to acquire that property in an exchange for value. So we exchanged the retail, the value the city was going to, the receipts the city would receive from the American sector, which is on that site right now, in exchange for the property. Worked up, and so that worked out very well. But you can see the neighborhood itself was, certainly was a challenge. Here we are building this in, contemporary museum, a large contemporary museum in a historic district in an area that certainly needed a lot of work. Over to you.
Sure. So, one of the interesting things, as Bob said, building a contemporary design in the historic district, and also, following federal, state, and city guidelines. One of the first things we did was to develop the CBPCD, which involved sort of all agencies in the city, the public hearings. There was also some, associated with some of the federal money, archaeology that had to be done on the site. The whole 2 blocks was completely studied for archaeology. A lot of interesting things were found in the ground, and I think they're actually on display at the ticket desk in the museum now. So it's kind of interesting history to the site. This is sort of the history designations of the existing buildings. There were several buildings on the site, most of them fairly well into disrepair. So we salvaged what we could as part of our zoning district requirements. 1037 Magazine, 1043, which is the old firehouse. Part of the requirements were to build this building here, the infill building, back as it was historically, as well as save this part of the facade of an existing building, which we incorporated into the new contemporary design. And I think
show them the fire station.
It kind of looks, yeah. So, well, let's see, I can go back here to show you. That's the fire station right there, which is, was fully restored. The building next to it here was actually in disrepair, had to be torn down. Somebody had built this piece sometime later, is not historic, but we rebuilt this facade to match what was historically there. It came out really, really nice, as well as a 2-story gallery onto 1037. So this is the CBPCD process that we started back in, I guess, 2006. This is, I like to point this out because this is the first cover page, and we're going to go through a couple of them. See how it's beautiful color image, the campus rendering, few titles, some sheet titles on there and sheet index. As we went through the process, the cover page got more and more covered with verbiage. So as we started, there were several provisos that were added. You'll see them there in the upper left, and they just tend to grow. And as this process went along, it was only the 2 blocks that Bob had mentioned before. As it went further into it, they incorporated the block across Magazine Street, which now has the hotel and the parking garage. And you'll just see the cover pages sort of grow with text. And at some point we said, well, let's just make them all text. And then at some point we just made the font smaller and kept trying to make them a little more relevant. And you see, we updated it several times as we went along. Things changed, building height changed, building position might have changed. So we had to just update it each time we went along, but still an interesting process and certainly a worthy process for the museum to designate its own zoning district and modify it as they grew.
One of our challenges in that regard was the new zoning regulations that were passed requiring that we conserve water and store water. And when that came out, we had already we had structures on probably 85% of the campus site and utilities under the remaining 15%. So it was extremely difficult for us to develop any stormwater retention. We were able to achieve some when we developed Andrew Higgins Plaza, but in other and we've stored it also on the hotel, but on other areas of the campus, we have not been successful. We've paid the fee in lieu of, because there just wasn't really any way that we could develop appropriate stormwater retention. So we get to 2005, and we've got this great master plan. We used the LARD study concept plan to put requests for proposals out. We've selected the firm. Actually, we had all of these very, very high profile architects, and then one lesser profile, but an extremely talented Bart Borsanger out of New York. And his approach was really the only one of all of these important architectural presentations that had a phased construction. And we knew that we weren't going to go out and raise, at the time, we thought $150 million. But he had a very unique design. We liked his approach. The board selected Bart Borsanger, and then he in turn selected the firm of Mathis Briere as a 50% partner. And Scott said that if I say nice things about him, I either get a fee reduction or he'll pay for the next change order.
Yeah,
so
I'm still waiting for it, though.
Yeah. But it's been, I do want to say, and I should have said this on the front end, that we have had the same architect, the same exhibit designer for these 16 years. And it has been from the museum standpoint, it's been a wonderful relationship. It's been tremendously beneficial. And we think, that the proof of that is in the museum that we've developed thus far, and we're not finished yet. So it's been a great marriage and a great team. So truly, I do have to say nice things about Scott, as much as it pains me sometimes. So we get to 2000. So here we are. We've got this great architect and exhibit designer. We have this great master plan. And then everybody knows what happens next. Katrina comes. In fact, Landis was almost 50% through our kind of the first project that we had was Discovery Hall on the north side of the existing museum. And so here the city's devastated. We don't know whether we're ever going to have visitors again. And we've got this great master plan. What do we do? So we spent months working on various scenarios that we were going to present to the board. Some included, just circling the wagons and saying, we have a successful D-Day museum. This is it. The city's never going to come back. And, some people believe that. And then we had phases where we have, 20% or 40% or 60% of the original master plan. But in our hearts and the staff's hearts and working with Nick, we presented 6 different scenarios, but only one of them, which was virtually retaining the entire master plan, albeit with some hopefully intelligent modifications, was what we hoped to sell to the board. We had a board meeting in Dallas because we didn't want the board to see all the devastation in the city, and we thought that would just take the heart out of them. But we had the meeting in Dallas. We made our presentations, and we have such a fantastic board, and they voted in to continue with virtually the entirety of the master plan, and just buckled down and went out and raised money and made it happen. So I love this old image because this is 2008, and it gives you a sense of how far we've come in what is really a tremendously short period of time by museum development standards. I mean, most museums that have achieved any stature have been around for 50 or 60 or 70 years or more. And here we are, brand new. This is 2008, and you can see that all we had was the D-Day Museum across the street that was intersected with an unattractive street. So we've come a long way in a pretty short period of time. And this is just kind of a quick overview of the various phases that we've completed. Since 2006, Discovery Hall, it was a Landis project, Solomon Victory Theater, Kushner Restoration, U.S. Freedom, campaigns, Founders Plaza, Arsenal of Democracy, Hall of Democracy, and Higgins. And we're on the way through for the final pavilion, the Liberation Pavilion. Founders Plaza, just to say a quick mention of that, was a challenge too, because we had the idea, I'd like to say I had the idea, I thought it was very important that we change the street to function as a street, but to really be looked at as, to attach the old museum to the new and not look like it's separated by just kind of a typical city street. So we came up with the idea of eliminating the curbs and using some upscale materials and creating, a connection from one side to the other. And I think it was tremendously successful, but I can tell you that the city did not readily accept that approach. But ultimately, we did convince them that we could do that in a manner that would actually make it safer for both vehicles and pedestrians. So Scott, you want to start with this? We'll kind of go through each one of the developments quickly, and starting with phase 1.
Sure. So one of the major design concept, obviously Bob mentioned, was that these were separate pavilions on a campus tied together with the final pavilion, which not in order of time or numerically, but the canopy of peace is sort of thought to be a design element that ties them all together. But all of the pavilions are supposed to sort of give a presence of safety and security, like a bunker on the outside. So you'll see a lot more opaque, a lot heavier materials like concrete. The corrugated metal is a reference to the warehouse district that the museum is in. So as we move around again, facing the outside of the campus, this is the Solomon Victory Theater. This is before the Higgins Bridge went in. So you'll see the piece of curtain wall right in the middle of the building. Of the image there is where the bridge connects the original D-Day and then the new campus. This is inside the theater. You'll see in a lot of cases on the interiors, the design team used, this one's a little bit more warm, just to give warmth to the theater, but there are a lot of sort of industrial materials and things that are meant to sort of make a reference to the United States after the war and sort of their efforts in post-industrial. In fact, this is a perfect slide here to say that metal mesh there, this is the ceiling that's in the American Sector restaurant, is actually a conveyor belt material. So again, it's used as a sort of industrial reference in an artistic way. And on the slide on the right, you'll see an old historic brick wall that was left exposed there, sort of.
Just to give another quick shout out to Walter Brooks. So I walked into Nick's office and one day and I said, in connection with finishing this first phase, Magazine Street just looks like, it's horrible. It's decrepit, looks like Beirut. And, so we've got to come up with a beautification plan. And I said, we can, if we start now, we might be able to, a year from now, we might be able to cobble together some funding and we'll put up some money, but we've got to get, it's going to cost several $1 million. But it's, we think, vitally important, or I thought vitally important as to the expansion. So the very next day I picked up the phone, I called Walter Brooks at Regional Planning to begin the process of trying to develop, a strategy for coming up with funding, and thinking we're going to be setting up meeting after meeting, and this is, it could take months, if not a year, to try to get this thing to work out. Well, I'm talking to Walter and making the case for it, and I'm about 2 minutes into the conversation, and he interrupts me and says, "It's a great idea. We'll pay for 80%." And I was floored. I mean, it was, I still remember the euphoria, how I felt. And I said, "Boy, you're going to really make me look good, Walter. This is, quite an achievement." But it showed, how astute he was and how he understood how these infrastructure improvements supported the development that we had undertaken. And I mean, he just really understands that and spends money in the right way, in the right place, or he did. He's retired, today, but we're still tremendously appreciative of all the support and help that he gave us. And then we went to the city and they put up 20%, and we paid for all of the design, because at the time, it's with federal funds, just the design process would take, they thought, a year to go through selection. So we put up all of the design. We were able, we think, to cut off about a year in the development, and made these improvements on Magazine Street that I think really add dramatically to the success of the museum over the years. Where am I?
Yeah, it's U.S. Freedom. So as I mentioned before, where the outside was sort of representative of a bunker, the inside, most of the buildings are this beautiful glass curtain wall. It's meant to be more open, light and airy, and they all surround the parade ground, which is a sort of a ceremonial military space. U.S. Freedom, interesting fact, is it's a 100-foot tall, one-story building that hangs airplanes. So you don't get to do many of these in your career, and it was quite a challenge, but a good one, and a beautiful space, I think. And it works well for all the museum activities, displaying the macro artifacts, but also I don't know if anyone's been to an event in there. It can handle anything from an intimate book reading to full-blown live music, and can serve 600 or 700 people a delicious dinner. This is inside the U.S. Freedom, looking back out towards the parade ground. You see the airplanes there in the air. This is a great project too. That was an existing warehouse that was basically all we did was reskin it, and it's the Kushner Restoration Pavilion. So it was built around the PT boat that you'll see in there, and you'll see the glass curtain wall there was designed and built to be removed. So when the restoration of the boat was complete, the boat could be taken out. And I think, they had set aside maybe 2-3 days to take the curtain wall down. I think it only took maybe a few hours or a day. And there you see the curtain wall's out, the boat's been moved out, and it's on its way to Lake Pontchartrain.
It may return to that location.
In which case you just take the curtain wall off and put it back
Right,
in.
right.
This is a campaigns pavilion right there in the front foreground. That's a piece of steel from the World Trade Center, a nice little memorial on campus. It's going to be relocated and put back into display. And another pedestrian bridge you'll see in the left there, connecting the theater pavilion to the campaigns pavilion. All of sort of the way we've positioned the bridges and the traffic flow is all based on the original visitor flow. And so as Liberation, which is under construction now, is completed, you'll be able to follow the original path, visitor flow through every building. This is the lobby of the campaigns pavilion. You'll see that the dark red sort of panels there are a Keynon panel, which is acrylic finish panel that's used all around campus. And each pavilion has its unique color. And you'll see some of the materials there again used in the ceiling. That's a Ohio grate, which is a metal grate you can buy off the shelf that is a fencing material. Again, used there as the guardrail.
When you say buy off the shelf, that sounds like it's not terribly expensive, and it actually is.
The rectangular ones can be slightly more cost effective.
Yeah.
When you cut them in things, they get really expensive.
Yeah.
There's an aerial of the campus. U.S. Freedom. The Hall of Democracy is not built there, but it's just a beautiful picture. U.S. Freedom and campaigns are under construction. You'll see the original Victory Theater right there where the CSAS was that Bob mentioned. And you'll see also some of the historic buildings I mentioned that we had to preserve and keep and restore. The parking garage, which is across Magazine Street, takes up half a block next to the hotel. A precast concrete garage, the most cost-effective ways to build a parking garage. But in order to make it look a little bit different and to blend into the neighborhood, I think we had maybe those infill panels, maybe 7 forms that we designed, and they were asymmetrical. So you were able to cast those 7 pieces and rotate them 180 degrees and place them in different ways. That sort of gives you this interesting pattern of a punched opening. So again, trying to use some cost-effective means to get a sort of unique facade. This is a rendering here of the Magazine Street. You'll see, later in the process, this is where Pori Fair was, and it was an outdoor plaza. We enclosed it to become a dining expansion for the restaurant. It has these nano wall, folding glass wall here that can open it up to the street. It's a very nice, and on the nice days of weather, you really feel like you're on the street. These are the historic buildings here. These two, the one on the left and the right, were restored. This is a new building that part of our CBPCD was to build it back the way it looked. This 2-story gallery here is very interesting. It wasn't part of our zoning requirements or our HDLC. We found an old picture of it and convinced Bob to spend a little money to restore it. And I think it just came out, actually, it's very beautiful restoration project there. This is the Hall of Democracy, 3-story building sort of centered around the education, for the museum, the outreach. It's got high-tech studios in it. They do distance learning. There's a lot of different things they can do, a special exhibit gallery. Here's a photo of it complete. You see the curtain wall there and the corrugated metal to reference the warehouse district, and the restored firehouse there on the right. The inside of the Hall of Democracy has a media center, can do live recording broadcasts. I think they even show movies in there from time to time. So
it's really a tremendous opportunity for us to expand our education programs and reach out across the country and really around the world. We have full-blown production studio, the same equipment that NBC has for the Today Show, and we unfortunately, we have been using it a lot through the COVID crisis, so we're putting so much more online, but we're going to be doing a tremendous amount of production of our own video and developing based on our own content research. So it's really almost the next phase of the museum in a way.
The offices of the Hall of Democracy on the 3rd floor, facing the parade ground for museum staff. A really great library on the 2nd floor of the Hall of Democracy. It's all sort of walnut bookshelves on the left and right, and a faceted chipboard plaster ceiling with the large AV monitor there at the end. So you can also do some outreach or some meetings and promotional stuff.
Yeah, one of the hallmarks of everything that we do is we build a new pavilion for exhibits, or the U.S. Freedom Pavilion, where we're not just looking at it for its most prominent use, but we're looking at every space for event rentals. The U.S. Freedom Pavilion, the effort that we took to make sure that it had not just exhibit lighting, but also event lighting, and that it had the right sound systems and acoustical treatment, to put on these big productions. And then, even building this library. And this is where, this is Nick's library. This is the Center for the, the Study of the American Spirit. So we didn't build his library across the street, but we did build it in the Hall of Democracy. It's a research library. It's absolutely beautiful facility, but it's also multifunctional. We have this big LED screen at the end. And once COVID is over, I think it's really going to be a really successful rental event space, when people can start attending events again, once again. All right, so the Canopy of Peace, probably the most interesting project that I've ever been involved in, and certainly the most challenging. And Art Vorsanger came up with and we went through, this is probably the sixth design. And this particular design, we actually reduced it by 20%, just took the same design and squeezed it in a little bit. And thank goodness for that, because it's such a unique structure in so many ways. No one who's worked on this has done anything other than talk about how complicated it is in ways that you don't really see necessarily right off the bat. But everyone knows that we've had issues with it and the fabrication and the fit up especially. But we actually, this is a photograph from the fabrication plant, where we had off the ground put the entire the entire canopy together above the ground. It was all fit up. And so we thought we had to do this to ensure that when we shipped it to New Orleans, everything would fit together. Well, there were, after we would leave, and Scott and I were there virtually every month, but as they were shipping this off, a lot of the pieces were cut up in order to facilitate the transportation. They weren't managed correctly. So by the time it got to New Orleans, we had a tremendous amount of work to do. And when we started lifting it, we had fit up issues, but we engaged the engineering firm, and we spent we just a tremendous amount of time and effort and money, and we now have a beautiful canopy. And this is somewhat of a similar picture with the canopy up in the air. Some photographs of the canopy under construction. That's what we call the center section, the tabletop, and then it's got a cantilever on the north and south sections. This is just a progress photo. And this is a recent photo of showing that this is one light fixture. And we actually have more light fixtures ultimately that will be installed than they have on the Superdome. So the light show is going to be spectacular. And this is a view from Rosie's. If you haven't been to Rosie's, we highly recommend it. And you get this great view of the canopy from the rooftop bar of the Higgins Hotel. And this is just another shot before we're installing fabric now. I don't know that we have any. I don't think we have any of the installation fabric installed, but it's well on its way. The fabric will be complete. The lighting will be installed probably by mid-February. So we're getting very close to the end. And this is just another image. This is interesting, but it just shows the complexity and the fit up that we had. And when you look at these flanges that had to match up, and the tolerances were so low. So it was like, what engineer and architect, what were you thinking? But we worked through it and we made it work. And now we've got a beautiful canopy. So this is the Higgins Hotel. We came up with the idea for a hotel years ago, kind of somewhat like the Disney model. It's like you're driving all of these visitors to to your space and to your area. And we think why not try to capture them and in a hotel, or certainly drive revenue. We thought it would help support our endowment and support visitation of the museum, and the museum would support the guest use of the hotel. And so we've actually, I can remember Nick and I flew out to Las Vegas and made a submission to ULI to get their support. And I can't remember how many years ago, but it was 10 years ago. And I guess it was just, no, it was probably more than that. It was as we were finishing up we hadn't quite finished up the first phase. And we went out and we did a presentation to one of the ULI programs, and you wait a couple of hours, and then they came back in the room, and they said, "We're sorry, but that is a terrible hotel site." And so we went back all dejected, and they gave us ideas to do retail. And then we went back and spent a bunch of money and got a retail consultant, came up with an incredible concept that was never going to work there. Ultimately, as time moved on and the warehouse district developed, all of a sudden what was a C- hotel site became an absolutely tremendous location for a hotel. And we started out with a limited service concept, and ultimately the board decided, that the hotel had to complement the museum experience. And we selected an architect, a hospitality architect out of Florida, and came up with this Art Deco design. And we think it's absolutely beautiful. It's been tremendously well received. That's an actual photograph of it. And I'm going to run through, I've got a bunch of photographs. If you haven't seen it, I'm running through it. You can see the Art Deco. Kilroy's Bar, unfortunately not open today. We've got a tremendous chef over there from again, we need to get visitors back in so we can open Cafe Normandy. A lot of really great private dining and meeting rooms. This is a typical King, and they, believe me, they're one of the suites. And then this is Rosie's, and there we are. We're back now to the Liberation Pavilion. So here we are after all. How are we doing on time? Are we over? How we? So we,
Unmuting myself.
this journey that started for me 16 years ago, and a little bit longer than that for Nick, or certainly a lot longer than that. Is finally, we've got the final major pavilion that is now under construction, the Liberation Pavilion. And this is the Liberation Pavilion tells the last component of the mission statement, what the war means today, why is it important, why is it relevant today? And I think it's going to end up really being the most profound visitor experience that we've created on campus. And to me, the most important. Starting with the first floor, it's the immediate the immediate aftermath of the war. These are the remembrance of the servicemen who made the ultimate sacrifice. Going into the cost of victory, in lives and buildings and architecture. There'll be an Anne Frank exhibit where we begin to explore. And then this is where we're going to talk about the Holocaust, the Freedom Theater, where you'll hear firsthand accounts of the liberators and the liberated at the moment of liberation. It's absolutely heart-rending. You'll go from there into Faith in Wartime. That's going to focus around the story of the four chaplains. Really profound story about sounds like the beginning of a joke, a Catholic priest, a rabbi, and two Protestants on a troop ship that was torpedoed off the coast of Newfoundland. And as the ship went down, they gave their life jackets to other crewmen and linked arms and prayed as the ship went down. It's a very moving story. And then the story of the Monuments Men, the effort that our country made to preserve culture of these other European countries, unheard of. And then this amazing chapel, multi-faith chapel that we're going to have on the first floor. One of the changes that we made, it was just from a development standpoint that was interesting, is that all of this, as you can see, this was all precast, and it would really putting the precast on the interior along with the sequencing of the structural steel was pretty complicated. So we ended up changing from precast to plaster on the interior of the chapel, but it's going to look virtually identical. And then as you move to the second floor, it's where America finds itself after the war. We began as a 17th ranked country in terms of power. We ended up at the end of the war, we're the most powerful nation. And with that comes other responsibilities, restoring justice, Nuremberg trials, great responsibilities, prosperity and change that came out of it. This is where we're going to talk about women's rights, civil rights, other advancements in medicine, things that came out of the war, forces of freedom at home and abroad. And then the ongoing fight for freedom, that we've won our freedom, but through the effort of the soldiers, the men and women, but that it's only won for a small period of time, and you have to continue to fight, and it ebbs and flows. And then at the end, what does World War II mean to you? What would you say to a World War II soldier if he was, standing next to you? And finally, on the third floor, we brought Phil Hedema back, and he's going to do, the final experience will be a revolving theater experience on the third floor. Again, it really complicated the architecture and the structure, but it's going to be an incredible experience where it's going to take you, in a profound way through the experience more or less that you have on the second floor, but through the lens of the four freedoms, of FDR's four freedoms. And then, so that kind of completes the campus. And this is just another project we're working with the Downtown Development District in the city and regional planning to improve Andrew Higgins from the convention center to the museum. So that's a project we're hoping that we can move along in the next 60 or 90 days. And then just real quick, you can see the progression of visitation at the museum. It's how dramatically it's grown, the impact that we have on the city and on driving visitors to the city. And this is really important. Of course, this helped make the decision to build a hotel easy. 80% of what is really over 800,000 visitors come from out of the state, and 50% say the museum is the main reason they're visiting the city. And so you can extrapolate that and understand that we drive 900 room nights, per night. So we have a tremendous economic impact and a lot of jobs. We're like everyone else. We're going through the COVID difficulties right now, but hopefully very, very soon we'll be back up to full strength. And again, we talked about this in the very beginning. The TripAdvisor rankings, they no longer rank museums, but the last ranking had us. We've always been for the last several years one of the highest ranked museums in terms of visitor approval in the world. And $400 million, when I was first hired, the expansion was estimated to cost $150 million. About a week after I was on board, I walked into Nick's office and I said, Nick, this is at least a $225 million expansion or project. And he just looked up and went, okay. I thought I'd get a reaction out of him, but no, that's what we have to do. That's what we'll do. And ultimately, you can see today we're a little over $400 million, and just some of the most of it raised from the private sector. State's been tremendously supportive as well. And this is we're coming to the end. So in 2022, the campus will finally be complete. Who we serve. Example of our lighting for the canopy with 20%. This is 20% of the lights. It worked. Good job, Leslie. You seen this?
Not this one, no.
Yeah. I sent it. Yeah, I sent it to Bart.
Well, it didn't have music on it.
Isn't the
Should
word
have.
Solomon?
Oh, it did? It's coordinated with the music.
We can't quite hear the music well. There you go.
So that's it.
Do y'all have time to answer just a couple of questions? I know we kept you late given the
Oh, sure we do.
Fire away.
Yeah.
Cool. Y'all have frozen for some reason, but you look very cheery. Fortunate. Sometimes you freeze people in like a really awkward spot. Y'all actually look great. So I don't know who managed to do that, but well done. One question that came up was, are there any changes planned to the original museum to complement the new programming? And I guess kind of coupled with that, some of the campus is obviously much older than the rest. And so how do you kind of balance the ongoing upkeep maintenance with some, updates to complement new programming, as well as just balancing that, tending to the existing buildings and developing new?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And in the last couple of years, we've started paying a lot more attention to really creating funding to, not only to maintain, but to maintain and improve the entire museum campus. We've recently changed out all of the projection equipment, about $500,000 worth of equipment in the Beyond All Boundaries experience. We hadn't realized how bad it had become until Phil Hedema came and said, "What have you done to my, experience?" We're planning, as part of the expansion, we're planning to completely refurbish the remaining D-Day exhibits, so they will be brought completely up to the standards of all of our other immersive and interactive exhibit experience. So we have really dedicated more dollars every year to upgrades and maintenance. I mean, we didn't have to do that for a long time because everything was new, but we're recognizing that that every experience that we have, continually needs to be upgraded to match the latest technology. All of our projection equipment throughout all of our exhibits is being changed, not all at one time, but in a sequence. It's being changed to laser projectors. So but the really big things that we're doing are on the distance learning and what's coming out of our education department, with production of documentaries and our programs are, we actually have a master's degree program.
Oh, well, shoot. We seem to have lost Bob and Scott. So we will adjourn there, but we will get their additional thoughts, which we can put up when we launch the recording of the session. Thank y'all for joining and dealing with our technical difficulties. I can attest to the attraction of Rosie's that's on the rooftop of the Higgins. I definitely recommend it. And then also I've been to a socially distanced event that they did in the Freedom Pavilion, and they do it really well. So a huge space that when you have 30 people in feels huge and safe. So thank y'all so much for attending. Check out not only the museum, but their hotel and the rooftop. And next week we have a content hour that is focusing on the local restaurant scene with Nina Compton. So if you have a chance, please log on, and thanks so much. Have a great week.